this road with my head held high. Nothing's ever gonna break the spirit that won't die. And through the dust and pain, I find a way to shine. Living wild and free, this renegade is mine. I am a renegade, and I'm never gonna fade. I am a renegade, hear the freedom that I make. Chasing dreams with my heart, tearing worlds apart. I am a renegade, and I'm never gonna fade.
All right. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your host with the most, Frankie Slauson, along with Mad Dog. And it's just the two of us today. And I know, yes, we're technically on a break, because we ended season 4 here about a week and a half ago, or a week and 2 days ago, as of this recording. But, we do some exclusive things once in a while. And when I'm able to do something wrestling related, most of the time now I get Mad Dog to join me because, as you know, he was a former independent pro wrestler from the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. And, I gotta have Mad Dog be a part of some stuff, because
I appreciate it.
So how was your Memorial Day weekend there?
I had a great time, man. Went up to camp, relaxed, just let it all hang out.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, today we're going to be interviewing. Well, we're going to be interviewing an author, and this author this is his debut book, but this author is also works for ESPN, so it's kind of a big deal. And this, I saw this book kind of floating around the internet. Was kind of curious about it for the last couple of months. They've been promoting it and talking about it, and I've even heard Eric Bischoff say a few things about it because it's coming out here in next month. So it's not even technically out yet. So we're kind of getting an inside scoop before it comes out. So it's says Say Hello to the Bad Guys by author MARC RAIMONDI.
Raimondi. That's the way he says it.
Yeah, Raimondi. That sounds about right. I just had to make sure I pronounce it right because, he must be. Does that sound like an Italian name, maybe? Raimondi?
Yeah, that's the way he says it. MARC RAIMONDI.
Raimondi. Okay.
Raimondi. Yeah.
Raimondi. Okay. Well, anyway, so we're I don't know. We're just pretty excited to be able to do this, and should be coming up pretty soon here, in a few minutes anyway. I'm just getting to live already here. So, Mad Dog, tell me about anything you did this weekend for Memorial Day, because I know it's kind of a big holiday for you, and I think it would because it's kind of this kick off to summer, right?
Yeah, we just we go up there and we drink a lot of beer and have a fire, and we get everything ready. When you have a place like that, a lot of things happen over the winter. Mice get up in there and they chew on the wires and the plumbing, and you just turn everything on, and you gotta be patient. You know what I mean?
I guess so. Jeez,
yeah, but mice. It was fun. We had a good time.
Yeah, mice.
No fishing or nothing.
Oh, I was gonna say though, you got mice coming running around. I suppose it's a campsite or whatever.
Yeah, it's out in the country. Property. Yeah. It's a big trailer. Our trailer's huge, man. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom. It's fairly a newer one, and it's huge. It's 85 foot by 15 foot wide. I mean, it's a big place, and you get the rodents coming up in the winter. They look for somewhere to hide,
and they figure why not?
They come and hide in the warmest spot. We opened up our shed and we had like ankle deep full of acorns and stuff. So they've got into the shed and they were living in there pretty good.
That's amazing. It's amazing that you would even allow that. But I guess, hey, I mean,
there's nothing you can do about it, man. There's nothing you can do about it. You gotta. If they can squeeze through a pinhole, they'll get in there. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Oh no, I definitely understand what you're trying to say. No, it just surprises me, I guess, that you'd let this. Well, I mean, since there's nothing you can really do about it, I mean, just gotta do what you gotta do. I guess that's just how it goes. But
Yeah,
no matter
no,
what, we're honored to have you on here, Bad Dog, because like
thank
I
you so
said,
much.
we don't really do a whole lot of interviews here and there. Well, we do on the show, but but here's still different. Exclusive interviews are different because it's different. It's a different format and everything. It looks like our guy is here already.
I'm honored to be on.
Hey, there he is. Hey, what's going on, Mark? How you doing?
Good. How's it going?
Oh, it's going really well. We're honored to have you on the show. Welcome to Renegade Radio, or these exclusive interviews, anyway.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here.
Mark, I want to introduce you to one of my crew members. His name is Mad Dog. The reason why I have him on is because he's a former independent pro wrestler from the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area.
All right. What's up, Mad Dog?
What's up, brother? How are you?
Your
I'm
facial
honored.
hair is like just incredible. The facial hair is just
That was my wild side.
tremendous. Tremendous. Tremendous.
Trying to keep that youth, brother. When you hit that 64 and the wheels fall off, gotta look.
Well,
Yeah.
you look great. You look great.
Thank you,
My beard pales in comparison to what Mad Dog has going on right now, and that
Yeah,
it's,
but
it's pretty epic.
the hairs are gone though, brother.
Well,
I got that Hogan
can't-
hair,
none of us are perfect, Mad Dog. None of us are perfect.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Now, before me telling you about him being a wrestler, would you assume that he'd either be a wrestler, former wrestler, or like a bike gang guy, or a mafia boss, maybe, or something?
Let's not stereotype. I thought he was actually a librarian. Let's not stereotype.
I would have been happy with male stripper. Would have been a good thing.
Yeah. I thought he was a gigolo. Can I say that
There
on?
you go.
Yeah, absolutely. You can say whatever you want. You can say whatever you want. It's the internet. Well, anyway, we're just excited to have you on because we're two guys that love pro wrestling. I mean, obviously, it's been in Mad Dog's blood forever, and it's been in my blood forever too. Obviously, there's a difference in age between the two of us. I grew up watching it. I was never a wrestler at all, even though I tried it out in high school or in elementary and high school. The different style wrestling, the amateur style. But I always loved watching pro wrestling on TV. It started with the days of WrestleMania 6. I had some friends that were wrestling fans, and we never had pay per view at all. But we liked it in the magazines and stuff, and watching Superstars and then Monday Night Raw. But I was more of a WCW guy. When I started watching wrestling, I cared more about the WCW brand. I still do to this day. You can call me a Mark all you want, but Mark, from one Mark to another, hey. WCW was cool. That's one thing about that was made it different. Now WWF was cool and WWE and all these other brands are cool, but WCW had a certain spark to it that made it very interesting, even before the NWO.
I agree, and you mentioned magazines. Like I grew up in New York, and it was obviously WWF area, right? That's the WWF's like home basically, and I didn't know, like as a kid, growing up, I didn't really know anything about any other wrestling until I started to really get the magazines, the PWIs and pretty much everything that I could kind of get my hands on at stores and just like bodegas in New York. If I saw a wrestling magazine, I was gonna grab it, and that's where I kind of learned about like Abdullah the Butcher and like Cactus Jack and some of the guys who were not in the WWF, and it looked awesome. It was like I want to find this, and that's how I found WCW, I guess, through that. Just as a kid, like it was like the early 90s. I was like 7 or 8 years old, I think, when I started watching WCW. And I've been watching WWF until I was like since I was like 5. But yeah, the magazines were huge because there was no internet. People, I think kids today, like they're very spoiled, like not even kids today, but all of us are very spoiled because there's so much wrestling and you could find it so easily online on social media, and it's a lot of it is streaming, and you can see the clips on Twitter or Instagram, and it's like, wow, it's like we didn't have the benefit of that. We had to kind of like find it. It was like like a treasure hunt. We found it. It was amazing, but it was hard to find.
See, when I grew up in the era of studio wrestling. I lived in Pittsburgh in a town called Mount Washington. I grew up with Jumping Johnny DeFazio was my neighbor, and I had a guy named Rocky Romano, and I had the Fighting Cop out of Carnegie. Well, I lived with all these guys. You know, wrestling actually started in Pittsburgh. A guy named Bill Cardille brought it in, and that's when McMahon bought it off him. It was the WWF. And I actually have an original belt from there, which I don't have it with me today. I'm sorry, but and I grew up with these guys. They all lived in my neighborhood. That's why I got so into it. I mean, I could walk up the street and see Jumping Johnny DeFazio standing on the corner without a shirt on. He was just massive. I mean, he was just a massive man, you know. So I was pretty fortunate. I got to know a lot of Rocky Romano was my best friend's dad, and his name was Rocky Romano. You know, he was a old time wrestler. See, I'm older than you guys. I'm 64, but you know that's where my hair come up. We used to watch it every Saturday at 4:00. You know, on our TV. You know, so there was no cable either, and we had to have my buddy hold the antenna so we could see it. You know, don't move. Okay, now I took enough time. Let's get with the book.
Oh, we got a lot of questions and all that, but just like we do with any interview, we want to learn as much as we can about the guy who behind the book first, you know, before we start going into it. We don't want to give any secrets away. But Mark, you know, it looks like going into like learning a lot about you. That you're an ESPN, you work for ESPN. That's kind of a big deal. I mean, coming off being an author, did that kind of inspire you to write a book about wrestling? Just because you work for the big time, and so they can help you kind of figure out who to get what type of kind of publisher to get and everything once you had your idea and whatever.
So let me tell you the story actually about how the book even came about, and it's because of my work for ESPN. So for 11 years, I covered combat sports, mostly the UFC, a little bit of pro wrestling, and a little bit of boxing. And that was my life for 11 years. And I've been with ESPN now for 6 years. And in 2019, it was announced that the nWo was going into the WWE Hall of Fame. And I was assigned that story for ESPN, for ESPN.com to write because I was one of the main like wrestling reporters at that time at ESPN. So WWE hooked me up with interviews with Kevin Nash and Hulk Hogan. Did the interviews, you know, wrote the story, and you know, really put my heart into the story because the nWo was such an important part of, you know, like my childhood, you know, and a lot of people's childhood, and it was such a big deal, and you know, to me, the catalyst of the entire pro wrestling boom of the '90s. So, you know, I wrote that story and then I moved on with my life, right? That was it. And I still covered some wrestling. You know, I did a bunch of stories about, you know, Roman Reigns and CM Punk and what have you, whatever. All of a sudden in 2021, I'm sitting in a hotel room in Houston, Texas, and I'm there for a UFC fight, which is what my job and my life was, you know, traveling, covering all the big UFC fights. So I'm there in a hotel room and I get an email from someone who says they are bless you, Mad Dog. Salud. Someone who says that they were an editor at Simon and Schuster, the publisher, right? One of the biggest publishers in the world. And this person is asking me in the email, do I want to write a book about the nWo? And honestly, guys, I thought it was BS. I thought it was a scam. Cause like what I just out of nowhere, just a cold email. Like I'm just sitting in a hotel room, you know, covering the UFC fight that week, and all of a sudden I get this email and I'm like, there's just no way this could be real because this is an incredible opportunity that I didn't even really even ask for. And I'm being asked about it. So I Google the name of this guy who says he's an editor because I didn't believe it. And it turns out it was true. It was true. It was a legitimate editor at Simon and Schuster, and you know we spoke on the phone that day, and we really kind of realized that we had you know a lot in common right away. He's from Brooklyn, I'm from Queens, New York, and we kind of had very similar views on pro wrestling and how much influence it's had on culture. And so I came away with that conversation saying like, yeah, I wanna do this, and I want to continue to work toward writing this book. That was, you know, 4 years ago now. And that's how it all started. So it wasn't even my idea, but it was something that, to further explain. So the editor reached out to me because he saw the story about the nWo going into the Hall of Fame on ESPN. And that's how he found me. And he saw that I didn't just write a quick 500 word, you know, news story, get in, get out. I really put my heart and soul into writing that article about the NWO when I didn't have to, and that's what made him say, you know what, I think this is the guy that I want to write, that I want to work with on the NWO book, and that's how it all came together.
Wow, that's pretty. That's no, that's pretty interesting because you never know. It's just like sometimes you just you have to look into things sometimes. And, not everything is spam related, but I understand where you're coming from though. Because sometimes a lot of people like even in my world, a lot of the empty promises will say, or they'll say, "Oh, you like to do this, but then you got to pay for everything. You got to do everything." We just thought we'd give you the idea, and that's all we're going to do. But hey, I mean, to have the support that you have, and somebody's watching what you're doing, and must be a fan, of how you write and everything. It's all how you present yourself, I guess.
That's true, and it's it's just a crazy thing because I could have, as a kid, growing up watching wrestling and loving wrestling and kind of like being obsessed with it, and I still love wrestling. I'm a lifelong fan, and to have that the opportunity come to me, it was pretty, it was kind of awesome.
Yeah.
It was kind of awe inspiring for me, and also something where I felt a great deal of responsibility and an obligation to tell the story the best way I possibly could, because I'm one of the people, like, if someone else was writing this book, guys, I would be pre-ordering it. You know what I mean? Like, that's the book that I would read 100%. So that's why I felt a great obligation to tell the tale in the best possible way.
Did you get
Well,
a chance to? Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, well, I follow Eric Bischoff's podcast, and
Yep.
and that's the guy that I would still trust and believe to this day because I've always been an Eric Bischoff fan no matter what. No matter all the whatever shit they put him through and everything. I feel he's somebody. I've had him on my show back in my early days when I first started doing interviews when I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I just wanted to give it a shot anyway. And he said good things about your book, and
Oh,
that's
great.
when I
Yep.
decided,
Yep.
and that's when I decided to get a hold of you because if he's saying good things about your book and it's not even out yet, but he got an advanced copy,
Mhm.
and he's already praising it already. I have to get you on here and talk about it because Bischoff doesn't get praise that often. He only gives praises to people who really, really deserve it, and you're definitely one of those people that deserve it. And I haven't even read the book either, but yet, I know the story of the NWO, but maybe there's some stuff in there that some of those fans don't know, which I'm hoping for.
Yeah, so about Eric Bischoff, and I'm super grateful that he likes the book, and he's talked highly of it. I really can't thank him enough. Not only for that, but also just the time that he gave me, because I went and I traveled up to Cody, Wyoming, and I sat down with him for a couple days, and at his home, at a restaurant, like, and we talked for hours and hours and hours about this, and I really I can't say enough about how gracious him and his wife Lori were to me. And honestly, guys, like, I would not have done this book if I didn't get buy-in from Eric Bischoff. So one of the first things that I did when I got the opportunity in 2021 was I contacted him and I set up a meeting with him in Jacksonville the weekend of AEW Double or Nothing in 2021. So I sat down with him at Dave and Buster's at a bar, and I told him who I was, and I had interviewed him before, so he knew a little bit of who I was before, for ESPN. So it wasn't a complete like cold meeting, but I talked to him then, and he said, "Whatever you need, you can come to me," and that really sealed it, because I didn't feel comfortable even agreeing to do the book if I didn't have someone like Eric Bischoff. He's like, he created the NWO. How am I gonna write a book about the NWO without talking to the guy who created it? So that was a big deal for me. And once he said that it was okay, that he would chat with me, then it was all systems go.
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead, Mad Dog, with your question. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I personally knew Virgil because he was a
Yeah.
Pittsburgh guy, and I actually did a match where he ran out. He sprayed my belt, and I have it hanging on my wall here. They gave me the replica of it. If I could show you real quick, I don't know.
Yeah, I would love to.
You guys don't mind. Well, he actually come out, and this was one of them church hall shows. I got to turn off.
Shut off your background there.
Yeah, I got to turn off my background. Hold on.
Mad Dog loves. He's good at technology. Mad Dog. He's such a professional.
Yeah, right. But anyways, there you go.
Oh, nice.
He sprayed the NWO. He sprayed my belly, my chest. He had a good time with the spray can at my expense. But
I have a funny story that's actually not in the book. I don't think it might be in the book. I forget now whether it was or not. But when Hogan first spray painted the belt with NWO, as we all know, as you see the logo here, and it's a lowercase n, a capital W, right,
right, that's
Yeah.
exactly what
and
it
a
is.
bit and a small O, right.
Right.
So when Hogan spray painted the belt, he made it a capital N, and people backstage were like, "Oh, what are you doing? Like, it's supposed to be. You're not. That's not what it is." But it obviously it didn't end up mattering. But there were people backstage that were like, "Oh, he screwed up the spray paint. It should be a small N."
Yeah, that's what Virgil did. He did a small N, a big W, and a little O.
Yeah, that's
Oh
you see,
yeah.
Virgil knows. Virgil knows. May he
I
rest in peace.
But that's
I
my
heard.
wall of fame. Where I got about 10 fight cards for all my main events.
Yeah. Plus, you got all these knives that if you ever had an earthquake or whatever, he'd be.
Yeah, I'm a knife collector.
I was gonna say I heard rumors. Now I don't know if this is true or not, but it sounds like it's kind of legit because I've been hearing some more about it. That the NWO logo was created by somebody that worked for Disney or something, some
That's correct.
female,
That's correct.
and she never got royalties for that at all, or
That is
nothing.
100% correct, and I guess that's going to be in another book, and I'm not really sure how that happened because I was the one who found this person, and she was not found for 30 years, and I found her, and I'm not sure how that ended up in another book, to be honest. And I can't say that I'm real happy about that because I was
Yeah,
the first person to find her, and I interviewed her years ago for my book, and somehow she got I don't know.
That
Anyway,
sucks.
so. Yeah, so the truth, yeah, that's the thing. And she was unknown. And when I sat down with Neil Pruitt, who was the voice of the NWO, right? He was the guy who did the audio, and he
yes,
was the producer for a lot of those early promos that they did, as well as some of the other stuff that they did, like the Disney MGM like trailer attack. Like he was the producer on that. That's all in the book. Great stories about that from Neil. Great guy. And when I sat down with him, one of the things that he told me, he was like, "You have to find the person who did the logo." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, "The person who actually sat down at the computer and designed the logo has never been. No one knows who she is. She's never been found." So I was like, "All right, well, I gotta find this person then. If I'm gonna write this book, right? I have to. I'm a reporter. This is what I do. I know how to do this." So, I asked Eric about it. He was like, "There's no way you're gonna find her because she didn't even work for WCW. She didn't work for Turner. She worked for a post production studio that was at Disney MGM Studios. And at that time, it was 96 and it was during the Olympics. So WCW could not be home in Atlanta because all the production trucks were being used for the Olympics. So they were doing everything out of Disney MGM Studios in the Orlando area in Florida. So that's right when the NWO started. Hogan cuts the promo at Bash to the Beach. He turns heel, and then they're scrambling. They're like, "What do we do? We need to come up with we know the group's name. This is super hot right now. What do we do? We got to create a logo." So they go basically like a few yards away to a post production studio at Disney MGM, and it was called Disney Ideas, IDEAS, like abbreviated. And this woman who worked there was the one who was assigned the project to do the NWO logo, and no one knew who she was. And I was able to find her through my reporting. And she's a real estate agent in Florida. And perhaps talking about this on other shows is what led the other gentleman, the author, to find her. But I'm
That's
the one who
nice.
actually found her. And you could ask her. I'm the one who found her. So yeah, so I found her, and it's true. One of the first things that she asked me, even before the interview started, guys, was how many shirts did they sell? And I kind of tell her like they've sold hundreds of thousands of shirts, and with her logo that she created, and she has not seen a dime of that money. And it's just so crazy that she said that it was like 2 hours of her life, something that she just did on a random weekday as part of her job, as she was there working for Disney MGM, and doing other logos, doing other production elements at the parks. And it's so crazy that one thing that she did has stood the test of time more than anything else. And you know, she never saw a dime from it. It's and now she's a real estate agent in Winter Park, Florida.
You know what's really funny about that is like because it is true. It has stand the test of time because almost at every time you go see a wrestling event or I don't care if it's an indie event or a on TV event, you are guaranteed to see somebody wearing an NWO shirt. Almost every time.
100%. It's just it's one of those things that is one of the most interesting things about the NWO itself is that the branding, and it was so impactful, and the person who made it didn't have any idea. It was just kind of like, all right, let's get this done. It wasn't all her like idea. So like there were producers from WCW in that meeting with her, and they had brought some ideas. Craig Leathers was one of them, you know, one of the producers of WCW, and he was like going to like Walgreens and CVS and looking at like the magazines and trying to find something that felt like the vibe of what they wanted the group to be. He was looking at like skater magazines and heavy metal magazines and like hip hop magazines and stuff like that. And so he had some ideas of what it could look like. But she was the one who actually put it onto the computer and designed it, and has never gotten credit for it until now. And that's crazy to me.
Yeah,
Wow.
29 years into it, because as I we do this live taping here, it is May 28th today, but it's the
Yep.
29th anniversary of when Scott Hall made his return to WCW, because that was yesterday. That was
Yep,
literally
that's right.
yesterday. 29 years. Next year will be 30. It's so weird because I suppose when you were writing the book, you had no idea that Scott Hall was going to pass away or anything. Did you ever talk to him about anything prior to him before he passed?
So it was it's crazy how it happened because once I got the opportunity to do the book, I didn't just immediately start writing the book. Then I had to do a proposal, so I had to draw up like almost kind of like a pitch. Like, here's what the book is going to be. Here's some sample chapters, an overview, what have you. So I was working on that, and I sent in the pitch, that proposal, to the publisher in like it was March 2022. I sent it on a Friday. I finished it up, and then by Monday, guys, Scott Hall had passed away, and it was crazy to me because I was
Oh
not.
man.
It was
I remember
like
that.
I was just getting ready, and you know what? I talked to Sean Waltman, who was also just so great to me during the process. Like, I sat down with him in LA. I lived in LA at the time, so did he. So it worked out. We met, and we had lunch together, several hours with him, and he was like, yeah, I'll put you in contact with Scott. And before he was able to do that, of course, Scott passed away. So really,
That's
really
shock.
wish I would have talked to him because, man, just a genius, just a creative genius, and just the coolest guy ever in wrestling, I think.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
machismo.
I'm
No.
wearing the Scott Hall shirt right now. I
Oh
mean,
yeah. There you go. There you
the
go.
best.
Oh,
Say hello to the bad guy.
yeah, that's the thing about it too. It's like when you go back to those days of the early Federation days or the character days, we'll say, it was all who would have ever thought that these guys who were the big top stars for the World Wrestling Federation would one day join forces and actually be. Yeah, I mean, I know they've worked, like I think Hall and Nash have worked together before, or they knew
Mhm.
each other for a long time prior to the WWF and all that. But like to leave the World Wrestling Federation and to come to WCW and to change the way wrestling ever was. Because if you haven't noticed, which I'm sure you do, which a lot of people notice now, there's a lot of copies out there. A lot of people who are trying to be like either a copy of the NWO or a copy of Horseman or whatever, or a copy of DX, and it's like, you know, I don't know. Like I mean, it's cool when a faction gets together, but you can try to see that they're trying to copy, and unless you have like originality, and you're showing that with your group, like Bullet Club. Bullet Club's pretty much a ripoff of NWO. They couldn't
Yeah,
say
it
NWO
is.
because they don't own the rights to NWO, so they had to change the name. And I was just
That's
like, well, you
actually
could
how they
call
got
it.
the. Oh, sorry,
You could
Sean.
call it aces and eights, like TNA did, because TNA had a great idea, with the whole aces and eights idea, but I still saw a
Yep.
lot of NWO with that. So I don't know.
Mhm.
I'm sorry to
They
interrupt
got
you.
their music. Yeah, they got their music. It's like they got it from a porno music.
So what's actually crazy about the music? So like kind of like the logo, everything was kind of being done in a rush because they just didn't have. No one really knew this was gonna blow up the way it did, so they were scrambling to like to get things together to market it, and the music was just like a generic track in the Turner Music Library. That was it. And they were just looking through what can we use, and they were doing it cheap because the logo too was like they only had 2 hours to make the logo. They were doing it cheaply, and they found this song. And Neil Pruitt was actually the one who told me he actually remembers the track number, like the file number on the in the Turner Music Library, and it's in the book, but I forget what it is offhand. But it was just something that was in the Turner Music Library, and they liked it. They played it for Eric Bischoff and Craig Leathers, and they were like, all right, yeah, that's the music, and that was it. And then they kind of doctored it, and they added some
Yeah.
customization with like NWO and like
Yeah,
all
yeah,
that
yeah.
stuff. But it's
It's
just
like
crazy how like this stuff was completely unplanned, and one of the reasons because Bischoff, he had this idea for what the group could be and what this was going to be, but he was so worried to tell other people. He only told people that really had to know in the moment because he was afraid that it was going to get into dirt sheets. He thought it was going to become, because that's how things were, and they are now. He was afraid of leaks, so he kept things so close to the vest that the first time like the marketing team at WCW heard New World Order NWO was when Hulk Hogan said it at Bash at the Beach. There was no preparation. There was no like marketing campaign that was already set up. It was like, oh crap, we have to act now. This is massive. And it's just for something that has had the lasting impact that it has had 29 years later, 30 years later and beyond. It's going to outlive us all.
And
The
the
fact that
shirts
it
are
was
still
so
selling like
thrown
hotcakes.
together at the time. It's just crazy that it's had the impact and like the lasting effects that it's had.
yeah. I mean, it's gonna be like our modern day Star Wars of wrestling, pretty much. I believe that theme that you were talking about. I think they called it Rock House, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken.
So
I
at
think
that time they didn't
everybody,
even know
yeah.
that the song is called Rock House, but they didn't even know what it was called that. They just saw it as like filed, track FCD 13. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That's all they knew it as. So they're all right. That sounds good, but it ends up being Rock House, and it was basically a mashup of several like Jimi Hendrix songs that were all kind of
That's
like
what I was just
put
gonna say.
together.
Yeah,
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 because Jimi Hendrix had a lot of inspiration to. The
right.
guy's been dead for over 40 years or 50 years, yet he still keeps creating new stuff.
Yep, yep.
But no, I mean, I tell you what, when I was I suppose this was I was 12 years old in '96, so that was the hype of being a fan because being a preteen and everything. It was just
Yep.
a cool thing. People were talking about it, and once the whole NWO thing happened, I watched it evolve, as it was happening, and what was funny, like when they started doing the stuff in Sturgis, and they picked that to kind of be the maybe it wasn't the birth of the NWO, but more like the baby shower, we'll say,
hmm
of it because of the whole belt thing and everything. They couldn't have picked a better time, a better period of time to begin this because I think wrestling really needed this. I don't know what would have happened had we not have had this happen. I know wrestling would have
hundred
continued.
percent.
Would there be as much? Would it be as big as today if that moment in time would have ever happened?
100%, because if you guys remember, WWF was still going through kind of the effects of the steroid trial, and WWF's their finances were down. They had that major PR hit with the steroid trial. Their image was kind of down, and WCW was doing okay with Nitro. Their ratings were pretty good, but they still weren't making money as a company. They were not profitable at all.
And then
So
weren't
you
they
had one.
going on live?
What's that?
Weren't they hitting it live on Monday night when they were out? When WWF was taping everything, and they were giving away their
Yes.
matches on the air.
Correct. So WCW was right. They were running live. Nitro was running live. Raw was running live only like maybe 1 out of 3 weeks or 1 out of 4 weeks. They were taping the rest. So it was a very difficult time financially for the business of wrestling. And it's not untrue. It's not an exaggeration to say that the business itself was kind of in really rough shape. I'm not sure what would have happened if there was no NWO. But when the NWO started, it changed everything. You know, it really, really did. It reignited the business, you know, slowly and then all at once, to the point where Vince McMahon had to change his strategy, straight change his product to better, you know, accommodate the fans of the 90s. And he did that, and then we got the Attitude Era. So if there's no NWO, WCW, do they beat the WWF for 83 straight weeks? Probably not. And if they don't do that, does Vince McMahon then change his views and start getting behind guys like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, DX? Maybe not. So to me, the NWO is the catalyst to all those things.
Oh yeah, and I truly believe there would have been no DX had there not been an NWO. People can argue that point all they want, saying that it's original creation by Vince and everything, but no, it was a rip off of, well, not really rip off. It was more or less a carbon copy of NWO, except a little bit more attitude because
Mhm.
you know in WCW they didn't try to swear as much. There wasn't a whole lot of nudity. I mean, they try to focus on sex a little bit later in their later years, but you know, WWF was more of the attitude. Okay, you know,
Mhm.
and whatever. But I don't know. And don't get me wrong, I love watching like a hardcore, you know, match with blood and everything and all that. But WCW was still their own type of creation,
Mhm.
even with all that stuff going on.
Not like
And
it's matched with juice, baby.
I just don't understand why. Like you can tell me 1,000 times, you know, why things had to end the way they had to, but I just wish that WCW would have lasted. You know, because AEW now has surpassed Nitro at least in the as far as
Isn't that
roster.
crazy? That's
Yeah,
so crazy to me, man.
And I
and you
don't
can't
even
tell
watch
me.
AEW. I don't even watch that. I've
Well,
never watched the match on there.
you can't tell me. Well, Mark, anyway, from what you know about AEW, and I know it's off subject a little bit, but that you don't see WCW and AEW. You know.
I do, I do. I see a lot of WCW. I see like a little bit of ECW. You know, I see a lot of the influence of like a Jerry Lynn and RVD. You know, even a Sabu. You know, may he rest in peace. I see a lot
Oh,
of that
God bless
influence in AEW, and I think that that's kind of what Tony Khan was a fan of. You know, he was a fan of BCW. He was a fan of WCW. So I see a lot of that influence. I do, and you know, I think it's really, really great for the wrestling industry to have a number two, you know, to have like a healthy number two. I think it's really, really important for the business, you know, for the boys, uh, because you know, for everyone, for people behind the scenes, because it's other jobs, you know, for these people that would not exist without AEW. Like, what would, you know, where would all these guys be if not for AEW? There's so much talent. There's more talent now in wrestling than there's ever been, by a lot, by a lot. And where would those guys be if not, you know, you get like WWE can't have everybody. There's only so many hours on TV they have per week, right? So
That's
I
right.
think it's great. It's great for everyone that there's an option there at TNA, and you know, there's more good wrestling now than there's ever been all over the world.
What I find really interesting about wrestling nowadays, especially with the way things are for like a lot of the people who aren't, you know, really on TV anymore and who are more or less maybe have had their run come to an end. You know, back in the day when you were done with wrestling, you kind of hid it, and you know, you hit it, you hit, and you probably never were seen again. Nowadays, because of conventions and stuff,
Hmm.
it gives these people, it gives all these wrestlers like a new lease on life because you know not only just to make some extra cash or whatever, but like to see fans that you know that watch their performances and stuff. And I'm sure you, Mark, have gone to a few conventions, you know, to learn about wrestling and everything. I'm sure from some people. I mean, have you not, or is this
I
something
have,
that?
yeah, of course. I actually interviewed Scott Steiner at Starcast a few years ago for the book.
Okay,
That was a great experience. But I think the convention circuit is you know, great for the retired, you know, guys and girls. I think it's you know, because there's no 401k in this industry, right? You know, they're not getting a pension. You know, there's no retirement fund, so it's like when your time is up, that's it, and you don't have anything else. And let's be honest, this is not, you can't wrestle forever. You know, you can't. You know, it's a young man's game in many respects, right? As I'm sure, you know, Mad Dog could attest. You
Two
know, it's
new
hard on
knees
the
this year.
body. It's hard on the freaking body, and you can't do it forever. And it's good that there's a way for those guys and girls to make money because as an example of something, you know, I covered the UFC like I mentioned earlier, and you know what? There's nothing like that for UFC fighters who are, you know, kind of out of the UFC and they're retired, and you know, so many of them keep fighting into their 40s even though they're way past their primes, and it's almost dangerous because they don't have another way to make money, you know, that much money. And it would be nice if there would be something like that for MMA fighters as well, because a lot of the, you know, the older guys are, a lot of them are struggling because especially guys like, you know, like a Chuck Liddell or a BJ Penn or even like a Tito Ortiz, is like they were so big and they were famous and they were amazing fighters, but the money was not there for them at that time. They were not getting paid that much. And now the guys and girls are making more money, but they never saw any of that. So it would be nice to have them, you know, maybe they can come to some of the wrestling conventions, like get those older UFC guys out there too.
Yeah,
Yeah, crazy.
hard to say, you know, when it comes to that. So when it comes to this book, what do you want fans to get out of this book? I mean, because it's like your debut book, so I mean,
Mhm.
you want to make it as good as you possibly can. Do you feel like everything you've got to tell every story that you wanted to tell?
I mean, it's so hard because here's my biggest challenge, guys, and this is like, as a journalist, I feel it's very important to know your audience and to have an idea of like who you're trying to reach with whatever you're writing, or you're talking about or what have you. And for me, for this book, I saw that like there were like three different audiences, and that's hard to do when you're trying to touch, you know, multiple kind of demographics of people. So the one audience is the hardcore wrestling fans who, you know, watch WWE now, they watch AEW, you know, they watch wrestling right now, and they're going to events and they know a lot of these stories about the NWO already. They listen to Bischoff's podcast and Bruce Pritchard and, you know, whoever. That's a tough group of people, right? Because they know so much. But I tried my best to try to serve them while also serving the lapsed fans, because there's so many people that were watching wrestling in the 90s. I mean, we're talking about more than 10 million people per week watching wrestling in the 90s that no longer watch wrestling, and they're just adults. They're like our age, Frankie, like, you know, they're
Yeah,
40, you know, and they're not watching wrestling. They have a wife and they have kids, and you know, they're doing whatever they're doing. I wanted to also write for them because I want to pull them back. I want to bring that nostalgia back to them, because it was a formative time in our lives, right? Even if you're not a wrestling fan now, you still remember fondly the NWO. And real quick, as an aside, I bought an NWO hoodie at Hogan's Beach Shop in Clearwater when I first started writing the book, and I wore that hoodie on every trip that I took to cover the UFC, to cover NFL now. And man, almost every single time at the airport or somewhere on the road, someone commented on the NWO logo. I mean, almost like 90% of the time, guys, which is just crazy to
They
me.
give you the for life.
The For Life, the Too Sweet. I mean, they're singing the music. I mean, these are just regular people at the airport. You know, just regular people. Just regular Americans, and they're not wrestling fans now, but they were then, and they still the logo and the NWO. They remember it so fondly. So I wanted to write for them also. And then there's a whole other third of my audience that I was trying to write for, and they're not fans. They're not fans of wrestling, but maybe they're curious about how wrestling has become such a part of culture. You know, maybe they're curious how, you know, the president of the United States is in the WWE Hall of Fame. How did that happen? You know, how did we get to the point where wrestling has kind of permeated different parts of our lives? The Rock is the biggest star in Hollywood. The leader of the free world is in the Hall of Fame. Like, wrestling is all around us, right? So I wanted to write for those people as well, guys. And I know it's kind of funny, it's crazy, but it's true.
no,
It's true.
it
So
is
those
true.
are kind of like the three audiences, and man, it is hard to try to write a book that kind of hits the sweet spot for all three of those audiences, because that was my goal, and I hope to hell that I achieved it. You know, I'll leave that up to the critics and the people who read it, but it was difficult, but I'm proud of what we produced.
So we can get that on Amazon, right?
Amazon,
How can I get my
Target,
autograph?
Walmart, anywhere you buy your books, Mads. You can roll up to Walmart on June 24th, and it'll be there. It'll be there on June
Yeah, but I
24th.
got to get mine autographed. I just don't want the book. I want mine autographed.
I got you. I got you. Pre-order it. Pre-order it for me. Send me an email, and I'll send you an autographed copy. I'll
Okay.
mail it right to you. My personal collection.
No, what's nice about all this too is like, you know, I think the fans, the real wrestling fans who have stuck with it from the beginning, from the time they first watched it till now, I think will definitely appreciate this because I get what you're saying. Some people have kind of faded away from it. I don't watch Raw every week. I don't watch AEW every week. The only reason why is not because I don't have the time, because I definitely have the time. It's just that I like to see new people get pushed a lot, and when they're pushing the same old stuff all the time, like WWE needs to work a little bit more on who they're pushing. And this has been told for many many years. What I liked about WCW is they get kind of like AEW in a way, but AEW does this too. But they gave the cruiserweights a chance.
Yep.
That was like the first hour of the show. When it went to 3 hours and everything. And I never heard the word cruiserweight prior to WCW. They gave the little guys a chance. They gave somebody. It wasn't always just about the big guys, but they did it right. Most of the time, they were starting off small with a few jobber matches or whatever with some cruiserweights and whatever.
Throw Malenko in there with the 1,000 moves.
They get the mid card going, with some of that stuff. Tell a few stories, and then the third hour would be the main event hour. And then, I figured that's the proper way to do it. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's too old school, but that's just, if you're going to have a proper wrestling show, then there you go, But, of course,
I mean, they think about it, too. Like, Chris Jericho and Rey Mysterio were two of the guys that were in that cruiserweight division, right? And they become two of the greatest wrestlers of all time. I mean, literally two of the greatest of all time. And they started out really in WCW's cruiserweight division, right at 8 o'clock, right at 8 o'clock Eastern or 8:20. They're doing their match against Super Calo or like La Parca, who, by the way, also La Parca was the friggin' man. And those guys got over, and they got over only because of themselves, not because of the push, right? They got over because they were that good. I remember I watched over 500 hours of WCW to research this book. And in like 97, like Dean Malenko, when he was going for the Texas Cloverleaf, the place would pop. Like the people would get on their feet for a submission hold. Like, and that was only because he was great. That wasn't because they were selling, Dean Malenko t-shirts and they were trying to push Dean Malenko. It was because he was freaking great. That's why.
He had so many moves, and his matches were like, it was like watching a wild orchestra dance. Like his moves went so smooth. You know what I'm trying to say? Like a hammerlock went into a leg lock, went into a wrist lock, went into a a headlock. And it was just all so smooth. It looked so good. I mean, right there you believed that was happening, It wasn't stiff.
He was a technical wrestler. That's
why like looking at Andre the Giant trying to throw a punch, That's
why we have a lot of respect for guys like Kurt Angle and guys like Bret Hart, because those guys, and Chris Jericho as well, like you mentioned, because those guys,
another Mount Washington guy.
I mean, I love technical wrestling. We can say what we want about Chris Benoit and all that stuff, whatever. But as a wrestler, I believe that guy was the greatest at everything that he did. I mean, as far as technical wrestling goes. So
one of the reasons why I'm one of the reasons why I'm a fan of AEW is because you kind of get that variety in AEW that you don't always get in WWE. WWE is like there's the WWE style, right? And everyone wrestles that style kind of, whether you're a luchador or you're 6'5" and 320 pounds. Everyone kind of wrestles the same style in a way. AEW, you kind of get a mix of different styles. You get some of the Japanese, you get some of the Mexican, you get the lucha, you get the technical stuff. I find that enjoyable to watch as well as an alternative. I think there's room for both of those. More than enough room for both.
But the matches are so great.
Time, the big guys come in and start banging each other's heads around.
And the matches are so great. When it comes to like AEW style. Because, like I said, it's almost similar to how WCW did it. Because WCW's matches were pretty incredible. I mean, there were a lot of matches that probably they shouldn't have tried or whatever, but it just was what it was at the time. Maybe it wasn't about selling shirts and all that and merch at that time. In the 90s, but once they started doing it, I mean, I don't think I ever remember buying a wrestling shirt. I mean, I don't think I ever did. Prior to when the NWO whole thing started. They're the ones that made my merch cool, as far as I'm concerned.
Yep, 100%.
My favorite shirt is the one I have on behind me. The red NWO with the black.
Hell yeah. The Wolf
look
Well,
big.
anyway, Mark, we appreciate having you on. I guess again, this book comes out June 24th.
It does.
Are you doing anything to get ready for it, like a little pre-party or anything going on?
Yeah, so it's out June 24th. It is available right now in pre-order. So if you want it right June 24th, you can order it right now on Amazon or Target, Walmart, Barnes and Noble, really anywhere that you can buy books. It's available right now in pre-order. Also, as far as events, I right now the only one that we've announced. We have some things kind of cooking, but right now the only one we've announced is we're doing a book event in Atlanta on June 28th. That's a Saturday, and I'm going to be chatting with a local sports radio reporter here, Joe Patrick. I cover the Falcons for ESPN. He covers the Falcons as well. So we're gonna do a little chat at a bookstore called Acapella Books here in Atlanta. But there will be more things that I'll be doing that have not yet been announced yet. But stay tuned to my social media, and you can find out more about that stuff.
All right, man. Well, we appreciate having you on and everything, and thanks again for giving us a little bit of your time, because I know you're a busy guy and everything. So.
No problem.
Thanks,
Anytime.
Mark.
I appreciate y'all for having me on because I like talking to wrestling fans. It's nice talking to the mainstream people, but I like talking to wrestling fans. I'm a wrestling fan. I know that I'm writing books and I cover the NFL, but I'm a wrestling fan more than I identify myself more as that than anything else. So it's good to talk to the real fans.
Oh,
right,
absolutely.
Mark.
Well, we appreciate you, and
Thank you.
hopefully the book does really well. Come on, New York Times bestseller already. Come on, now.
Let's go. Thanks,
All right,
guys. I appreciate it so much.
What you
All
gonna
right.
do when the Mad Dog takes a bite out of you, brother? Play my music.
All right.
Mad dogs on the prowl, in the ring, take you down. One bite's all it takes. He's the king of the town. Wow, feel the ground start to shake. Mad dogs never fake. Hear the roar of the crowd when he's on the prowl. Ooh. Ow! Eyes rattle loud, so loud, with power in each pound. Fangs gleam in the light, Mad Dog's in for the fight. Ow! He's the beast, the fighting pride. When he steps in the ring, there's nowhere to hide. Feel the fury, muscles tight. Mad Dog's ready, it's gonna be a night. Ow! Wow! Steel cage closes in. Blood sweat